And we are live. Peace to the family, peace to you and yours, peace to the world. This is What's the Science podcast. I am your host, Brother Blue Pill, joined by my co host, the good brother ALKEBULAN44. Peace to the family.
Peace, love, and light to the family. Again, it's another episode. Another monumental episode to our podcast. Again, we're going to be diving into some deeper science. Make it make sense. When it comes to these articles that are starting to surface. A lot of people need some form of reasoning when it comes to some of this language in reference to science. So that's what we're going to be doing. A lot of information has been coming out, and we're in the process now of collecting everything that's been released. We're going to present some information and some data today. So it's going to be another monumental one, and yeah, like I said, we're going to make it make sense tonight. So
Yeah, the family's in for a treat. There has been a unprecedented amount of development in the field of science, and as I said earlier, I said that this year would be about space. Last year was about time. And the year before that was about the grand conjunction of time and space, the conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter. So now that's playing out where last year we got a lot of you know different articles and monumental moments that really spoke about cataloging time. You know, this year in particular has been all about space. Once they started traveling and making trips out of quote unquote space, I said, all right, watch, it's going to be a whole space run taking place. And even last year, it was heavy space themes as well, coinciding with the year when crypto was going to the moon and the Dogecoin and, all of those particular iconographies dealing with space, kind of ever since Elon Musk became part of the national conversation and national discourse. We on an exploratory mission to space with them speaking about going to the moon, going to Mars, now the James Webb telescope, and back all of these CGI images of the nebulas. So
yeah, we're gonna talk about it. And, of course, again, this is What's the Science. So, we're going to get into the concept of space as well, because when we're talking about space, we're talking about magnetism, right? We're talking about space being evident only because of the fact that there's a loss of, energy that produces what you call a dielectric field, which is the field that we see in reference to a magnetic field, which is actually a dielectric field. So, when we're talking about space, we're really also talking about the magnetic field. There's been a plethora of articles in reference to a depletion of the magnetic field or a weakening of the magnetic field. But what they're not referencing as far as a weakening of the magnetic field is the fact that and the perfect image that I can give the family of a magnetic field is a toroidal donut. So basically, everything in existence has a magnetic field around it. But when we're talking about the weakening of a magnetic field, we're actually talking about the center of that toroidal donut beginning to expand, which again is called a dielectric portal. So when that dielectric portal, the center of that toroidal field begins to expand, that means the magnetic field spatial footprint begins to decrease, which means if there's a larger hole within that toroidal field, that means the magnetic field is actually getting stronger, right? So we're looking at a process of an implosion taking place. So this is when, they start coming out with articles in reference to portals and, things of that nature. But really, in essence, they're just talking about time. Time is beginning to speed up because that dielectric portal is beginning to expand. Remember, the dielectric portal is the center of that toroidal donut that's actually moving counterclockwise towards center. So when that happens, then the spatial footprint of the magnetic field begins to decrease and time begins to move quicker. So that's why a lot of articles in reference to space was coming out, because we're in essence talking about an acceleration of time. So we're going to talk about it, and there's a couple of articles that we're going to highlight, that coincides with that fact. So
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. A whole lot going on. And again, these are teaching moments, opportunities to seize upon teacher moments and, you know, give people a more grounded explanation of what's being said, because oftentimes what's being said can go over your head. They're talking over you, they're talking around you, but ultimately they're talking about you. You know what I'm saying?
facts.
So you deserve to be included in the conversation. When somebody's talking about you, they should be talking with you, not at you, not around you, not above you, not beneath you. You know what I'm saying? And the science can get real tricky.
Real
And
tricky.
then people just run with the sensationalism, like we saw with the CERN, you know, uh, uh, uh what can I call it? The the forest fire, the viral storm that takes place with, the snowball effect,
Hmm.
especially if it's rooted in fear, it catches on, like a forest fire online, and it starts engulfing sequoias. You start seeing some giants go down. You be like, damn, you fell for that fear campaign? I thought you was
Hmm.
more sturdy as a tree. Like, you supposed to be out here supplying oxygen, giving people resuscitation in times of dooms and gloom. You ain't supposed to be adding to the shade, talking about CERN and all this. And I'm like, all right, well, what's the conversation about the subatomic particle, right? Because this is all about observation. So if they are going through those links of observing you at that particular scale, if you will, what are you contributing in terms of equivalency to say, well, I'm really going in, because all of this was talking about shadow work and going inward, right? Yeah, how much more inward can you go to CERN? But you can go further than that, right? So why is the emphasis not on that technology? The technology that is so elaborate, what I'm saying? The technology that's so elusive, the technology that's so effective and efficient, yet so ancient that, science can't crack.
Hmm.
You feel me?
Hmm.
They can't hold a lamp to it. And every day the science goes by, they come out with a new article that dismisses and disputes years and decades of research of what they said was the standard. This is the way it's done, and this is how it's done, and now they got to scrap that. Oh, maybe we were wrong. Every
Hmm.
single day I see one of those articles come out. Oh, maybe we've been wrong all along. We got to revisit the conversation based on X, Y, and Z that was just found. This particular skull in this part of the planet pushes the record back another 100,000 years. That is consistent with what I'm seeing coming out of the science community. And these are not the conversations that we're having, but people have the nerve to engage in a conversation about CERN and not engage in a conversation about, well, what is the God particle and who possesses it?
Right. Right.
You know what I'm saying? And how can you naturally activate it? And how can you even give it more uh, levels of elusiveness so it continues to not be captured by their observation? If they can't see a thing, then they cannot devise, a way to either attack it, disrupt it, interrupt it, describe it, explain it, contain it. None of those things. So it was said that they could never observe the face of God.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then when I seen them come out with the article with the first, before James Webb came out, they came out with the article saying that the probe reached the sun and was able to utilize a cup and touch the surface of the sun. To them, that what they're saying, like, that's them going backwards on the Icarus story and totally going beyond mythology and defying what was said can never be done. You can't touch the face of the sun, just like you cannot see the face of the Most High. The face of the Most High is, they said, it was too glorious to be observed, and you're gonna live to tell about it. That's what all of the classic mythology, the Clash of the Titans, and all of that Medusa stories was about. And again, you know, echoing or reverberating those particular mythos during these times are celebrating the fact that we just had the conjunction, which is what the Clash of the Titans are, between Saturn and Jupiter, the two biggest gaseous planets, that when they pass, they both extract parts and pieces of themselves and become culture. They create a new culture based on the cross pollination of both of those environments. And they spoke about that in The Man Who Fell to Earth.
Hmm. Hmm. And see, and also, this is why, because we got to look at this. Like when we read these scientific articles, we got to remember that we're not even dealing with scientists who are writing these articles, or not even writing the articles, but who are doing the experiments. So that's why they always find themselves going to the drawing board, because we're dealing with mathematicians and they're trying to quantify something that's invisible. The fact of the matter of them trying to find the God particle, in essence, is of course just returning back to the body. And more specifically, even when you're talking about CERN, that is an idea that actually came out the body as well, in reference to the duodenum, and it's right above the small intestine. And when you get the gallbladder, the liver, and the kidneys to actually secrete, an alkaline fluid in the stomach, it becomes like an electric soup. So when you digest food, the whole idea is to break the solid down to its original constituents. So when you're talking about breaking the food down to liquid, down all the way down to an atom, when you get the food down to its smallest contiguous in that in the duodenum, uh, literally those body parts or those organs begin to actually release an alkaline fluid, and it literally splits those atoms. And that is equivalent to the idea of actually smashing atoms together to get to the smallest particle in the universe. So that is the concept of CERN, is just based on the duodenum. And I want the family to actually go look up the duodenum. I want to say it's spelled Duodenum, the duodenum, and it sits right above the small intestine. But again, when you digest food, it's the same concept. The food is breaking the body is breaking the food down. The hydrochloric acid begins to mix in, but the duodenum, the gallbladder, the kidneys release a fluid in the stomach, and it's like an alkaline soup that literally splits the atoms apart to begin to electrify the body. So that is, again, the idea of the science when we're dealing with Western science, is that they're basing their studies on how the body works. So again, the God particle is not too far from who you are. I mean, in essence, we exist as the God particle in so many words, but like Blue was speaking about, these individuals are also looking into mythologies. When we're talking about Saturn and Jupiter playing a big key factor in this, that was a highlight of what was to come in the near future. So um, you know, it's just so much that we need to touch on again to make everything kind of come together and make sense. And like I said, we're not dealing with scientists when we're reading these articles. We're dealing with mathematicians, and they're literally using equations to try to solve something that's invisible, um, that's not tangible, and it's something that you can't quantify. So,
You know
again,
what?
go ahead.
And that's funny you say that. I was having conversations, some mental discourse with myself, and I was making some observations of some things, I had listed in front of me. And Spirit said to me, it said, math is the language of the invisible realms. And it said, you know, words are the language of the worlds of things that are visual and physical, whereas math is the only language that can explain that which is not seen or tangible, but exists, you know, through force and nature.
Mhm. And that's an interesting concept because actually, when you apply mathematics, the only way that you can actually experience the unseen world based on mathematics is if you literally take two equations and multiply them. So we're dealing with the golden ratio times the Planck dimension. And the Planck dimension basically is the smallest wavelength within the physical universe. It's that threshold right before you get to the unseen world. So literally, if you take the golden ratio and you multiply that by the smallest wavelength within the physical universe, that's how you can pierce the speed of light, which gets you to the unseen reality. So in essence, dealing with that, and that's actually going into Dr. Oibo's equation, the Gagu, right? So when you're dealing with the golden ratio and you multiply that by the Planck dimension, that's how you go from your transverse wave, which makes up the physical reality, down to what you call a longitudinal superluminal wave. And that's a wave that can move faster than the speed of light. And that's the wave that actually compresses and comes out of the Planck dimension into the invisible world. So there's only actually two equations that's dealing with that. And that's what Dr. Oibo actually came together and applied one equation to represent the golden ratio times the Planck dimension, because that literally represents everything in the invisible or in the unseen world. So
Mm.
again, when you're dealing with Albert Einstein with the E equals MC squared and things of that nature, it's all mathematics, but it's dealing with the concept of light, um, that basically you can physically see. But also, again, if you're dealing with the golden spiral, what we call the golden ratio, and you multiply that by the smallest wavelength within the visible universe, that's how you can literally cross again that threshold of the speed of light into the invisible world. So again, where the scientists are what we call scientists today are trying to understand things from an invisible world by using mathematics. But this is why they always got to come to back to the drawing board, is because they're not also understanding that everything within the invisible world is just a different field modality. And when I say field modality, I'm talking about the fact that we exist within a large field that is made up of one substance. So it's a gas. So based on the compression of this gas is actually what's going to bring into fruition what we call a quark, what we call gluon, what we call a lepton, or all these invisible traits. But it's in essence the level of compression within the gas that actually brings about these different quote unquote identities of different quantum particles. So that
Well,
is what
yeah,
we're speaking
that's a
about.
wonderful segue. Yeah, that's a wonderful segue. I want to jump right into that
The
particular
aliens.
segue and get into these alleged particles that were just discovered. Uh,
You're
they
talking about the aliens, I believe.
the petroquarks and the quadroquarks.
Actually, yeah.
All right, and interestingly, what they don't ever say is when these things were discovered. They just say on the day that they were supposed to be firing up CERN, all of a sudden they discovered these two molecules. I'm like, you didn't even fire CERN up yet, and you discovered that you had a name for them and everything.
So yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
let's
Um, yeah, yeah. Let's segue into that. We can pull that up and read it, and then we can crack that one down, break that one down.
yeah, go to system preference. All right, give me 1 second. I gotta Get something situated. System preference.
Somebody, what's the speed of it? Yeah, duodenum. Yeah, duodenum. Let's see. Took our science, math, and knowledge, gave us their stories, took our cosmology, biology, math, language, and gave us the book of Matthew, John, 10. Yeah, it's a fact. That's next science class. Yeah, family, again, we got to remember that, again, when we're dealing with these scientists, they make things very complicated when the universe is very simplistic. Because in essence, again, we're just talking about actually, two forces or two motions, two counter rotations. We're talking about the conjugate geometry of the universe in reference to force and motion versus inertia and acceleration. So again, the perfect geometry to represent that is that toroidal donut. That is the geometry of the universe. And when they're speaking about these different quantum particles, we're just talking about different compressions of the ethers. So a stronger compression is going to produce an electron. An even stronger one is going to produce a particle that's smaller than that. And we've been conditioned to believe the bigger something is, the more powerful it is. But in essence, the smaller something is, the more powerful it is. So the smaller the spatial footprint, the greater the energy, the greater the capacitance. So if you can think of a gamma wave or versus a radio wave has long waves that will be considered less powerful than a gamma wave because the spatial footprint between each wavelength. So there's a shorter distance between each wavelength in a gamma ray versus a radio wave. So that's what we got to consider. So when we look at, like, for example, plutonium, when we look at plutonium that's very explosive, it's explosive because of the size that it represents. And, once that plutonium explodes and we see that large mushroom cloud, we actually consider that as power. When that's not in essence power, it's the original state of that mushroom cloud, which was actually plutonium. So, when we even go back into the body, when we're looking at DNA releases UV light, right? UV light would be considered high energy light. And again, the concept is to understand the wavelengths. So again, when you look at gamma waves, you notice that the space in between each wavelength is a lot shorter, which means it's going to be a lot more powerful. Thus, reason why gamma rays is that much more powerful than, say, like radio waves. The distance between each wave is very long. So that's when we get into space. We're dealing with rare fraction. But again, when we close back in on the quantum world, that's when it becomes a lot more powerful. So, this is even down to our ancestors always said to go within, study microbiology, because it's microbiology, or the internal aspect of the body, is where your power is actually coming from. So, that's something that we got to begin to understand as well, you know. So when we break down these articles and they're speaking about anions and quarks and gluons, just remember that that quantum world is a lot more powerful than, any celestial, star, or, anything celestial, right? Because again, we're dealing with spatial footprints. Again, the smaller the space, the higher the capacitance. So just keep that in mind. The smaller the space, the higher the capacitance. It's not the other way around. So that's something that we gotta, keep in mind. Right now, we just kind of waiting on pull that up. If anybody got any questions too, definitely put them in the chat. Until we wait for Blue to pull that article up. Let me see if anybody got anything. Yeah. And mind you, too, I spoke about this on a recent post that I put up. You know, when they're talking about CERN and they're talking about, you know, portals, opening up portals. You know, they get into the fear mongering, of course, and they, you know, they tell you, you know, got, you know, some people even do it. Teachers that we consider teachers even do it. They get into the fear mongering aspect of these things, and you know, they're telling you that you got to get extra flashlights because it's getting ready to be a blackout. You got to pack your water. You know, you got to, you know, get extra blankets because, you know, power might go out, all of these things. But what I tell people and what I do specifically is I like to make science tangible. Our ancestors understood science to be a verb, and they would utilize their intellectual property to demonstrate science in real time. So when they're talking about portals, they're talking about a dielectric acceleration. So when you align yourself with certain events in reference to, you know, certain days, what you're supposed to do specifically is do something you love doing. And that sounds very vague, but it's specific. So in reference to a portal opening up, again, what you're getting is a dielectric acceleration. And dielectric acceleration is gravity. So what we call gravity today is actually called dielectric acceleration or charge acceleration or implosion. You can call it implosion. You can call it, you know, phase conjugation. But when you do something you love doing during a portal event, actually working towards it and moving towards it is the force in motion. And the inertia and the acceleration is that dielectric acceleration through the heart. Because when you're doing something you love doing, literally the heart begins to beat at a specific pulse. And that begins to implode gravity. And I spoke about this, you know, in my class, but that's what Ptah, ancient Kemet, represent. Ptah represented manipulating the dielectric field by way of doing something you love doing, because when you do it, you're actually going to increase the dielectric acceleration through the heart, which is going to create an implosion process, which is actually going to attract whatever you desire or whatever you're trying to get to a lot quicker based on a portal being open. So if you see Ptah, he's holding a jed pillar to his heart and I want to say a scepter. He's holding a jed pillar and a scepter. The scepter represents the collection of electricity, and the jed pillar represents the fact that you have the capacity with your heart to manipulate the dielectric field. So again, when they're talking about CERN opening up and portals opening up, very basic. The idea is to literally do something you love doing, which increases that in dielectric acceleration, or the heart extrapolating charge from gravity, which creates this implosion process. And that implosion is actually like a suction that begins to attract or bring things to you that you desire in reference to the intent that you put during the portal being open. So that is in essence what you do when they talk about portals being open. And it sounds very basic, but it's exactly what is supposed to be done. You manipulate the dielectric field by doing something you love doing, and that actually accelerates things to you quicker than the average person. So again, they're not giving you that science like that. They get you in a state of fear mongering and, you know, all these extra things. But again, I'm giving you literally the science on what our ancestors understood. And that science that I'm speaking about right now is actually called optimized translation of vorticity. I speak on this quite a bit. But again, it's literally the heart extrapolating charge from gravity and increasing the dielectric acceleration through it. So that's how you actually attract things. What they talk about the law of attraction, that is an attraction. It's an implosion process. It's an implosion process, not necessarily like an attraction per se, but it's an implosion process. Let's see. All right. Somebody asked, how does cleaning the body help manifest your visions? Let me see. Well, I mean, cleaning the body raises your capacitance. When you clean the body, you're raising your voltage. And when you raise the voltage in the body, because when you're talking about voltage, you're actually talking about your pH, your potential hydrogen. So when you raise your potential hydrogen, or you cleanse the body, you raise your potential hydrogen, which actually raises the voltage in the body. And when the voltage in the body is raised, that increases your capacitance to literally be able to, again, increase that dielectric acceleration through the heart, which, like I said, is an implosion process. So even the shape of a heart that we see today, we see the shape of the heart kind of looks like this, right? It's like that. And that is actually called the Mandelbrot set. But what they're talking about is implosion. So you ever see the heart and it comes up, but then it goes through at the top, it looks like it's getting ready to implode. That is dielectric acceleration. And that's what they're talking about. So the image of the heart that we see today on Valentine's Day, and things of that nature, that's actually called the Mandelbrot set. And they're talking about fractal symmetry by way of, again, the heart extrapolating charge from gravity by doing something you love doing, or putting your passion first, or just loving on somebody, right? Love literally is the superpower that attracts things to you, but you got to be in tune, and cleaning the body actually gets you to that space, because again, you raise your capacitance to increase that dielectric acceleration or that implosion. Right. This is why you suggested doing whatever you love, whatever makes your heart smile. Right. And this is why in Kemet, they would keep the heart in the body upon death, because the heart is what generates the magnetic field. And the magnetic field is where all your experiences and, all your information that you took on in this physical reality exists. It's in the magnetic field. So they will keep the heart in the body because it produces the magnetic field, and it's actually able to maintain itself without the physical body, which is, a whole nother conversation. But that is all in reference to, how you maintain the magnetic field here. Like, what are you eating? Are you cleansing the body? Are you fasting? Are you taking on a larger amounts of information? Are you staying away from toxic people? Are you listening to higher frequency music? That is actually going to strengthen the magnetic field. So upon the physical body dropping, you can still remain conscious as you without the physical body, because you literally allow the magnetic field to get stronger so that it can maintain itself outside the physical body. So this is why in Kemet, they will keep the heart in the physical body upon it dropping.
Yes, sir. Can I think I worked out some of the glitches in terms of the sharing feature.
Okay.
I would like to get into some, god damn it, come on now.
It's not letting you share the
Yeah, Chrome. I'm having a little bit of issues with the Chrome, Google Chrome. Let me see if I can just switch it real quick to Safari. Give me 1 second.
Okay. Yeah, nice guy body challenge is coming up, family. Yeah. Yeah, and again, family, look up, like I said, the duodenum, DUODENUM, the duodenum. The duodenum. They don't talk about the duodenum a lot. And like I said, that's actually the idea where they got CERN from, because like I said, when you think about it, when you break food down, the idea for the body is to break the food down to its smallest particle. In order for the mitochondria to take that in through the electron transport chain and produce that ATP, that adenosine triphosphate. And once you get that adenosine triphosphate, that phosphorus, once oxidized within the plasma, within the body, it combusts and releases light. And that's the intelligence or the light that the body uses, or the cells use for that matter, in order to communicate, reproduce, replicate, and things of that nature. So that is the whole idea of CERN, is literally trying to get to the smallest, particle, which in essence is the proton, the hydrogen atom. But our body does it every time we digest. So that's why I want you to look up the duodenum, because that is the key feature in that process taking place.
Yeah, again, setting up some perfect segues,
Yeah,
some amazing segues. I just got to land this plane real quick.
yeah, yeah. We
Second,
could.
but the hydrogen atom, we're gonna
Oh,
get a video. Then I want you to build on, how important what's being shared, in our present day, modern day context by somebody coming along and saying, look, hydrogen is not number one, and we've actually hacked the program. You know what I'm saying? What benefit would we have to leverage technology, creating from a space where we know how to manipulate hydrogen, you know
mhm.
what I'm saying, and exploit the space between hydrogen or between molecules or the space in between space, period.
Right,
When we thinking like this and talking like this, and to your credit, of course, you're the first one I heard speaking this conversation, and now it's pretty much being
prevalent.
supported in a lot of people's narratives.
Right.
You know, even the TV show that we shout out to our brother Biko, of course, and
Hmm.
yourself. I think that, and I guess a little bit part of me, that I guess that was a combination of all three of our personalities that came up with a whole alien and called it the man who fell to earth, and speaking about hydrogen fuel technology and
Mhm.
dielectric fields and electromagnetism by way of the Faraday. He say his name,
Faraday. Yeah,
Faraday.
Faraday. Yeah, and people, for those who don't know, the Faraday stems from the Faraday cage. Blue spoke about this, but it basically protects you from electromagnetism or electricity. So when they would practice, plasma discharge back in the day, or they would do experiments in reference to electricity, in order for them not to be electrocuted, they would sit in a Faraday cage because they understand that electromagnetism can't penetrate a Faraday cage. But when we get into the deeper science and we get into something called longitudinal interferometry, that is dealing with a compression wave that actually can move through a Faraday cage. It can move through anything. But that's dealing with light. That's dealing with, you know, and also too, when we talk about the speed of light, light doesn't have a speed, right? Because when you're talking about light, you're talking about omnipresence. So something that is omnipresent and infinite can't have a speed because there's nothing outside of infinity. There's no boundary outside of infinity. So light necessarily can't have a speed. We're just talking about what you call the rate of induction. And the rate of induction is based on creating a perturbation or a disturbance within the waters that we exist in, because we live within the waters, within an omnipresent, what our ancestors call the primordial waters of noon, but it's the invisible world. So every time I move my hand, my vocal cords begin to vibrate. I create a disturbance within these waters that sets up a perturbation, which is a disturbance that actually generates what we call gravitational waves. The perfect analogy, or the visual that I can give the family, is if I were to drop a rock into a pond, that pond will be equivalent to counter space, the rarefied version of water that we exist in. And those gravitational waves that's produced um, in the pond will be equivalent to the gravitational waves that's produced in the rarefied version of water that we exist in. So that's actually what's taking place every time I speak. I move my hand. There's a longitudinal wave that's produced, which is the disturbance or the gravitational waves within the water that we exist in, that move faster than the speed of light. So this is why they're actually having trouble, even in nuclear fusion, maintaining plasma at a greater rate, is because they're not dealing with that science called longitudinal interferometry. If you dealt with that science, then they would have the capacity to be able to maintain plasma for a longer length of time in order to, literally produce free energy. But that's in essence what that wave is. It's called a longitudinal wave. So again, the minute I snap my fingers, I create a disturbance that generates a wave that moves faster than the speed of light. I kick my foot up, I speak, I'm creating a disturbance within the waters, and that wave is a ripple, or like I said, equivalent to me dropping a rock into a pond and seeing those the waves ripple out. That's what's happening every time, we move, we speak. And I spoke on this as well. This is why they don't tell you we live within a field or a rarefied version of water, is because then you will see your symbiotic relationship to the sun, because the sun never emits light. The sun is not emitting light. The sun is creating a disturbance within the rarefied version of water that we exist in that's generating those waves. And what we're feeling as heat is just a compression of that longitudinal wave that we feel as, or we believe that is light coming from the sun. But in essence, it's actually the sun generating those ripples within the water. And we just feel the result of those ripples that's taking place. So we able to get it?
Oh, I got something going on. I don't quite know if it's what it is that we want to do. Still hitting buttons here.
Okay.
Give me 1 second.
If all else fails too, because my end doesn't have a feature. I think because you're on the actual platform of KTL. I don't have a share feature on my side.
Through here.
So yeah, family, we just, getting extra saucy with the science. It's good to see our people talk like this because, like I've said in the past, this is the type of language that we got to start speaking and getting familiar with, because this is what's going to take us to the next level. This is how they keep us out of the scientific rooms, because again, they make science very complicated. They use big words. They say, 1 minute we found quarks and the next minute we found bosons, and all of this stuff. But again, if we understand that we live in a field, and based on the compression of the field that we exist in is what is going to produce what you call an electron, or what you call a proton, or a quark, or gluon. But it's all in reference to the spatial footprint, or the length in between each wave that what we call electron is produced. So.
All right, let's see if we can get into this real quick. Share the screen. It's very fractal.
Seeing it's appropriate though.
It's giving quantum.
It's given.
Yeah. Yeah. But we want to go into this video.
Yeah.
Does it show the screen change?
Yeah, I can see it. I can see it on my end.
And is it just one screen now?
This was both of our screen on the left side, and then the main screen is the video.
Okay, tell me if you can hear the audio.
Okay.
Greetings to you, Your Excellency. Thank you for this great honor to meet with me and my wife. We appreciate your leadership in the strong Pan-African spirit that has enabled you to take a center role in uniting Africa. And we also appreciate what you have done regarding the diaspora and asking Africans, people of African descent, to return back to Africa so that we can now rebuild Africa the way that it was supposed to be. I'm very happy with being here as a result of Honorable Frank and Isaac Kagosi, who wanted to make sure that these things would take place. I've heard about Uganda most of my life, the same way that everyone else about Uganda. And looking at movies about the guerrillas and all of those things, and you hear stories of the past president that were here. But then you hear stories about what you have done in trying to keep the resources of Uganda here in the country and make sure that the people of Uganda are able to prosper and this land is no longer raped and taken, the properties taken away and given to other people.
That's right.
I was born Terrence Deshaun Howard. I've become an actor. I've been nominated for Oscars and Golden Globes and SAG Awards. But those weren't the things that really moved me.
Talk about it.
As a child, I studied chemical engineering at Pratt Institute, was there for 2 years until I saw that there was an inconsistency with the math there. And so I went out to explore a new way of understanding how the universe worked, and I was able to define the grand unified field equation they've been looking for and put it into geometry. And then with that geometry, I was able to put props on that. And what I'm saying is now we have invented a new form of flight that I would like to bring here to Uganda to replace the drones, to replace the helicopters, to replace the planes. We have all the funding necessary. What we need is just a fertile ground in which to build this. Now, this is the geometry of hydrogen. Of hydrogen.
Hydrogen.
This is the proton itself. So any bond that hydrogen can make, our linchpins are able to make. So we're talking about unlimited bonding, unlimited predictable structures, supersymmetry. And the linchpins are now able to behave as a swarm, as a colony that can defend a nation, that can harvest food, that can remove plastics from the ocean, that can give the children of Uganda and the people of Uganda an opportunity to spread this and to sell these products throughout the world. So we are no longer just selling agricultural products and pieces from the land. We can now sell and take center stage with technology. But the main purpose is to defend the sovereignty of a peaceful place and a peaceful people without having to have our young men lose their lives. It's an incredible new technology that I want to develop here.
So the hydrogen, what does it do, the hydrogen?
Well, what I'm saying is this is the geometry of hydrogen. They tell us that hydrogen is the very first element, but hydrogen is the color yellow when you look at it through a spectrometer. And you never see the color yellow without seeing red and orange in front of it, and without seeing blue and green afterwards. And each one of these elements, each one of these colors represent an element. So what I'm saying is hydrogen isn't the very first element, it's just the first visible element. Mm-hmm. And all the other elements are descendants of that. And the same way we can paint colors and mix colors together, the children of Uganda with this new science will be able to mix elements together like you mix colors. And the same way you're able to mix music together, you will be able to now control the nature of things. We have the grand unified field equation in geometry with hydrogen. Whoa. With the linchpin, what happens when four forces meet. Whoa. The space that's left over, if you were to take 4 bubbles and try and push them together, the negative space where they don't touch is the element we call hydrogen. That they've given me the patent to, worldwide patent to. Okay. And I've turned that into a flying vehicle that has unlimited bonding. And we can now predict the entire periodic table from same elements. So when MIT and Harvard and Yale will all have to come here to Uganda and to the University of Uganda in order to be able to teach or learn about this new geometry. With your permission, I would love for him to be able to bring 2 of these over to you.
Okay.
Which is, can you take these over to, will he be able to see from here? I don't know how well you can see this.
I can see very well.
This is the geometry of hydrogen. It ends up creating 6 pentagons. So you should take both, because I'll be able to demonstrate from here as well, but he can see them bonding by putting them together. This is just a model of the props. But it generates tangential flight And that's the ability to fly on one's own center of mass.
So this is one.
This is just one of them, but you can put them together and bond them.
One molecule?
That's one atom.
One atom.
When two of them come together, they make the first molecule.
Okay.
Which
they are bonded together by their own.
Yes. Well, we put magnets on it, and you
you put magnetism in. You are not contesting that hydrogen combines with oxygen to make water. But what you are adding on is that the previous description of the atoms was not accurate.
No.
That what they were calling the orbit was
just
was the fallout.
It's the inertial plane. It's the discharge from the center of the electric charge.
The discharge of the core.
Of the vortex.
Of the nucleus. Oh, this is very interesting. Thank you so much. So I give you land. How much land do you need?
Oh my God. Can I catch my breath?
Yeah, I felt that one.
Thank you so much. So you are most welcome.
Just that easy.
That easy.
He said, we got the funds. We need the land.
That easy. All right.
There's a lot right there.
Received. And I knew that I would one day be able to present it before heads of state. That didn't come from any school. On top of my head, and I kept trying to see his face, but I couldn't see his face. I wasn't allowed to see it. But these new shapes, wave conjugations, that didn't look like the Platonic solids. And I woke up, but from that motion and rebuild the periodic table according to the proper form away from us. It's now been given to us again, and I want to bring that here.
You are most welcome.
You are most welcome. Right? Bring that flash shit here. You're most welcome. So these are amazing developments that have just, materialized in the past few days. This video is relatively new. And can you explain in general terms, if you can, what did our brother just show the dignitaries of Uganda, a country who just recently came upon a cache of trillions of dollars worth of gold?
Which in my opinion, they're going to, well, he said he had the funding, but Uganda, yeah, that's, as far as what Terrence Howard is presenting, he's talking about, the basic building block of all matter, right? We're talking about hydrogen. And when he's talking about basically recreating the periodic table, for those who haven't been aware, when you look at hydrogen, that's the first element on the periodic table. So let's look at carbon, for example. Carbon is the sixth element on the periodic table. So all what carbon is basically hydrogen folded in on itself 6 times to produce carbon. If you look at oxygen, oxygen is the 8th element on the periodic table. Oxygen is basically just hydrogen folded in on itself 8 times. So the whole periodic table is nothing but hydrogen that is self-referencing itself based on the atomic number of that specific element on the periodic table. So in essence, the only thing that actually exists is hydrogen. In ancient Kemet, hydrogen would be equivalent to Atum, because it says from the primordial waters came Atum. Atum would be considered the hydrogen atom. And then Ptah came shortly after, representing the fact that you have the capacity to manipulate the fabric of space and time by understanding that hydrogen is the basic building block that creates everything. So even if you look down into the physical reality is nothing but high energy light, because it's hydrogen literally compacted or compressed in on itself. So in reference to him also speaking about infinite bonding, hydrogen is fractal. It's a fractal attractor. And basically, if you're utilizing fractal symmetry, you have the capacity to literally build hydrogen on top of itself infinitely. And this is the same concept that plants follow. Plants follow that golden spiral based on fractal symmetry, because if you go outside and look at a plant, you'll notice that the leaf of each plant literally grows around itself to basically allow each leaf the adequate amount of rain when rain falls, so that each leaf can get a equal amount of share of water. And that is actually called phyllotaxing. Phyllotaxing is based on leaves building around a stem based on the golden spiral. So when you're utilizing, again, the golden spiral, what we call the golden ratio, which in mathematics is called fractal symmetry, you have the capacity to build something infinitely. And that, what I spoke on earlier, is called the Mandelbrot set, And people have seen this image before. It's literally like when you take a lens or a camera and zoom in on a picture, and you notice that every part of that image is the same.
Hold on. Your volume
just like
went off.
The image right here is fractal symmetry. This image, I don't know if the family can see it on my end.
Yeah, they should see it. Your voice is your voice went off a little bit.
Oh, it did?
Yeah.
Okay.
But
can you am I coming through clear now?
No, it still sounds like you talking through a synthesizer or something. But I purposely did set the screen up so when you're speaking, you were speaking about fractal geometry, and I wanted the people to get a visual of this is specifically what he's speaking on. You know, when these pictures emanate into different fractal images, identical images of themselves, but the dimensions of them change, right? But they're still in essence the same picture. They just are dimensionally different, right? But they still are obeying a mathematical golden mean proportion, that they are still maintaining this shape regardless of how small it gets, right? It doesn't phase conjugate in regards to its shape, just its size.
Facts.
Yeah.
Let me know. Am I still sounding kind of like I'm coming through a synthesizer?
Yeah.
Still sounding like that. Okay.
Yeah, something with the mic. And the mic is muted now.
All right. Do I still sound like it?
You better now.
Better? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me know if I continue to keep sounding like that. I might have to go get my other phone. But in the meantime, yeah, basically what we were speaking on is the fact that, yeah, he's building, technology in reference to hydrogen, because hydrogen is the perfect fractal attractor. And you can build hydrogen on top of hydrogen to literally create different elements. This, in my opinion, is how our ancestors understood how to build the pyramids, because they understood that you take the basic building block and just fold it in on itself to create the different minerals that make up the pyramids, which was, limestone, granite, things of that nature, electrically conductive material. So, and also, again, too, when you're dealing with hydrogen, if you look in the body, in the center rung of DNA that makes up the codons, if you look at the center of DNA between the rungs, you'll notice that it has a hydrogen bond. They call it like a hydrogen zipper that moves up and down the DNA. And this what begins to unlock or lock your DNA based on that hydrogen bond that moves up and down the center of it. And when we're speaking about hydrogen being a fractal attractor, we're literally talking about the concept of even upon death, the plasma body has to implode through that hydrogen bond that sits in the center of the DNA in order to maintain the memory or consciousness of who you are as a person. So there's literally speaking about technology that you can utilize for pretty much anything in existence. And, you know, again, you can take hydrogen and literally build on top of it infinitely because we're dealing, like I said, with fractal symmetry, what they call in mathematics fractal symmetry, or what we call the golden spiral. And I said, like I spoke on earlier, plants do it. When you notice, if you go outside, you look at a plant, around the stems, the leaves will grow, but they grow in a specific ratio in reference to the 1.618. So they do that based on a science called phyllotaxing. And they do that basically to allow each leaf to get the same amount of adequate rain, you know, when it rains. So yeah, that is something. And in all honesty, it sounds like he was studying a little bit of Dr. Gabriel Ebo.
Yes.
You know, I'm interested, you know, because Dr. Gabriel Ebo, he came from I want to say Ghana. He's from Ghana. But that science that Terrence Howard is speaking about literally comes from Dr. Oribo's you know, textbook. So I found that kind of interesting. But yeah, you know, he's definitely on to something.
Can you see the screen here?
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, hydrogen bonds have been directly detected for the first time. So this just happened in 2017. So he's definitely speaking on an advanced science in regards to the ability to make observation of, you know, hydrogen and manipulate it, you know, in a way to push the boundaries. And given Africa this Wakandan technology at this particular time, when they have a verifiable economy to back it up, and they have positive birth rates, right? They're not dealing with the rest of the planet. Is talking about with the negative birth rate situation. You know that the continent is the symbol, the embodiment of life, of the future, of the aspect of our genome that will continue to go on. You know, so is a major move that speaks to um, planting the seeds for a future when Cepheus, you know what I'm saying, gets back on the throne, and we could look towards somewhere like a Uganda. And it's worth noting as well that when we speak of Uganda, and I'll pull this article up next, that's where the ghost DNA comes from.
Right.
So in 2020, during the C-19 situation, right before that, they were speaking about ghost DNA that they were able to detect in West Africa, right? And right after I started posting about this story, ironically, a Uber driver comes and picks me up, and I still have this video on my phone today. And we start building, and I tell him about the article I came across, and he said, "Let me see the article." And I pulled it up and I showed it to him. He said, "That is my village right there. Those are my people. We are Uganda." He's like, "Don't let him tell you the other shit." He's like, "Uganda." And for like a whole hour, he just went on, you know, and his brother was very much politically charged about the state of melanin and the state of magic in melanin. And he told me that the ghost DNA that they detected comes from his people, from his village, and it's a Yoruba trait. He said that this is the actual DNA that comes from the Orisha who physically walked this land, right? This is according to what he's telling me, based on his cosmology, turned all the way up, and I'm supposed to tell him different. So to turn around and see Uganda put in this particular light, me knowing as well what comes by way of the Congo, you know what I'm saying, and the mineral riches that area of this planet represents, and knowing that Congo is the heart of Africa, Kenya is the heart by way of marketing, right? Because of Lion King and shit like that. But that's the real heart. That's not the real center of the continent. That would be that's area that we're speaking of, you know, where they speak about the gorillas in the mist. You know what I'm saying? Where they had ravishing civil war, you know what I mean, eliminating those ancient people. But let me just read something real quick based on this DNA. Ghost DNA in West African complicates stories of human origins. They have rescinded everything, family. Everything that they taught us in the education system, they themselves have come back and said, we got to revisit and revise, you know what I'm saying, everything that we've taught because it's all wrong. Right? About 50,000 years ago, ancient humans in what is now West Africa apparently procreated with another group of ancient humans that scientists didn't know existed. There aren't any bones or ancient DNA to prove it, but researchers say the evidence is in the genes of modern West Africans. They analyzed genetic material for hundreds of people from Nigeria and Sierra Leone and found signals of what they call ghost DNA from an unknown ancestor. What are you doing? Let me get some of that. Our own species, Homo sapiens, lived alongside other groups that split off from the same genetic family tree at different times. And there's plenty of evidence from other parts of the world that early humans had sex with other hominids like Neanderthals. They're speaking for themselves. Okay. That's why Neanderthal genes are present in humans today and people of European and Asian descent. Homo sapiens also made it with another group, the the Denisovans, and those genes are found in people from Oceania. I don't know nobody from Oceania. Okay. The finding of ghost DNA published in the Journal of Science Advances further complicate the picture of how Homo sapiens or modern humans evolved away from other human relatives. It's almost certainly the case that the story is incredibly complex and complicated, and I've had kind of these initial hints about the complexity, says Shriram Sankaranaman, a computational biologist at UCLA. I bet you did. Scientists analyzed the genomes of 405 West Africans. San Karaman Manaman says they used a statistical model to flag parts of the DNA. The technique goes along a person's genome and pulls out chunks of DNA which we think are likely to have come from a population that is not modern human. The unusual DNA found in West Africa isn't associated with either Neanderthals or Denisovans. Sankararaman and his study co-author Arun Dervashula thinks it comes from a yet-to-be-discovered group. We don't have a clear identity for this archaic group, Sankararaman says. This is why we use the term ghosts. It doesn't seem to be partially closely related to the groups from which we have genome sequences from. The scientists think the interbreeding happened about 50,000 years ago, roughly the same time that Neanderthals were breeding with modern humans. They always have to put themselves in a narrative that they do not exist in. Okay, family? This is called fragility. Never wanting to be left out of the narrative of the story. This ain't got nothing to do with you, Jack. They just said in one sentence, this ain't got nothing to do with us. But in the next sentence, they want to insert themselves in the narrative to tell you what they hypothetically felt. There's some people who they hypothetically think that they are associated to what they was doing 50,000 years ago. So, you know, this is how they convolute the story. right? Investigating and searching for your origins and your narrative, and don't have a clue what theirs are. But they're supposed to wrap their minds limited around your expansive origins, and they don't have a context to explain who the hell they are. Whether they came from Neanderthals or Denisovans. And we don't have none of that in our genetic markers, mind you. But then they want to tell you that there's something about, we should be negotiating to be equal to somebody. How?
Right. Yeah. It's all about them again, rewriting the narrative and placing themselves in it. Because again, they understand that us as people are multidimensional. So we exist outside of space and time in reference to us possessing melanin, which is electrically conductive. So the fact that, again, we can exist, outside of the physical body deems us extraterrestrial. So there's no way that they can, again, wrap their minds around a concept that is invisible, because they lack anatomically the ability to process a larger portion of the electromagnetic spectrum, which would give them the capacity to be able to do this type of study. I mean, the fact that we as babies initially born with a more expansive Lucus Aurelius is a key structure in the midbrain that links us as cosmic beings to the universe. So we naturally come into this world a lot more dominant than, the people who are doing these studies. But again, these people can't go as expansive as we could, because we have the capacity to wrap our minds around this type of study because we're studying ourselves. So that's why it's important for us to get into these sciences, because we can not only tangibly experience, what they're speaking about in reference to these articles, but we can also understand the concept and then see ourselves play out, when it comes to a celestial origin, or when it comes to, even down to an aquatic origin. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, that's
also one that is ancient and antiquated to a degree that you should be able to see yourself, right, as ancient beings. Family, if for nothing and for nobody else, let this information resonate with you so you can see yourself by way of what we consider to be, faulty research and evidence nonetheless, right? Because they're going to be stumbling over your bones and your fossils to look for something to always find themselves in. But nonetheless, in the process, they are unearthing, insurmountable amounts of evidence that speaks to your ancient, antiquated nature. Hence the fact this latest article came out a few days ago on July 14th, and it was titled Fossil Tool Analysis Brings to Light Earliest Humans from Southern Africa. Right? Australopithecus, right? I mean, Australopithecus, those would be, our melanated people from the Aborigine, you know what I'm saying? Or what have you. Fossil tool analysis by Southern Cross University geochemist Dr. Renaud Joannes Bayou has played a central role in an international collaboration that has properly identified the earliest humans. The new study, published in the journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, demonstrates that amongst the 23 specimens analyzed and potentially representing early Homo from Southern Africa between 2.5 and 1.4 million years, a maximum of 7 of them actually represent Homo, while the others more likely belong to Australopithecus, Australopithecus, or Paranthropus. These results have, and they could probably be straight up talking about an ancestor that was anatomically superior. You feel me?
Yeah.
They have no idea what they're looking at. They so far outside of this conversation, and they're creating, those bones to begin with. there should be an entire priesthood involved in them even handling bones of that nature, because you can't go in their crypts and touch a goddamn thing if it's not consecrated and allowed to, you feel me, be touched or analyzed or exhumed without some sort of approval and ceremony. They blowing flutes and shit.
Right.
But our stuff just ends up on, you know, lab room floors. And they assign these, you know what I'm saying? These names just clearly says we just don't know.
Right. It's yeah. Before you continue, yeah, like I said, it's semantic. It's the fact that again, they're clouding our judgment when it comes to these articles based on using verbiage that is outside our quote unquote, intelligence. And that's because, of course, we are limited to a certain amount of information in Western society. So when they again present these articles to us, is something that we can't truly internalize because we see it separate from us. We don't see anything in reference or related to us. So that's why we don't dive deep into the science. So this is again why they can, dig up certain bones and things of that nature and do all type of experiments, because we're left out of that conversation, when in essence they're studying who we are as a people, and they do it, 365 days out the year. So, that's why, like I said, what's the science? This podcast is here literally to break down these articles so that way you can see yourself in them and then just have a higher level of appreciation for what you're reading, which hopefully will motivate you, family, to do your due diligence and doing the research. So that way, eventually down the road, we can have our own labs, our own priesthoods, our own study group, so that way we can study ourselves as opposed to have people who can't even wrap their minds around the information that they're looking at.
So, yeah, look at the skull of this particular ancestor, right? Look at the high cheekbones,
right?
Okay? And look at the area for the eye socket. Look at the ability, right, for observation through a lens, okay, through an eye. An iris. So let me go into the Bible now and speak about this eye. And look at the nose. Look at the capacity, right, to intake oxygen to a degree where whatever was going on up here must be incredible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But their inability to conceive what this actually entails, they want to call it all of these other names that they have assigned it, like, look at all of these species: A. garhi, A. africanus, A. sebedi, all of these different species, right? Look at all of these ancestors.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Who they're going to try to say, oh, these are just, derivatives of apes and what have you. And all of that is hypothetical. They're all theories.
Speculation.
Speculation. And all of these bones date to millions of years, but they can never say that that's you. But these are upright, right? These are upright. These were not bipedal. I mean, these were bipedal. These were not, four-pedal beings. You feel me?
Mm-hmm.
So they in essence don't know what they are. See,
and they're not even telling you that they're finding quartz crystals and silica, because that's what the bones is made out of, a piezoelectric component. So just studying the volume of that amount of crystal in the bone will tell you not only that, but the density of a bone will tell you where these bones come from, because as we all know, it's common knowledge that our bones are a lot more denser than the Europeans' bones. So studying the bones alone will tell you where these bones came from.
Right.
And it's all in reference to the crystal content and also again the density of the bones.
Look at the hip capacity, right? Look at the lung capacity though. Look at the lung cage, y'all.
The broad shoulders.
The broad shoulders, elongated arms showing probably abnormal strength in lung capacity, showing the ability to create abnormal strength by way of ATP production, right? And obviously the oxygen intake in the broader nostrils, and then again the large oval space for the eyes, the observation factor, the eyes are connected to the brain. So this computer must have been off the hook in regards to optical observations, where it was able to see from far distances, right, on open plains, able to intake all of this oxygen, right? And then his stature is one in which it doesn't necessarily have to carry a lot of weight. It looks like it, look at the hips, right? It looks like the weight was very well balanced, and it was a bipedal being that had the ability to move, travel, right? So, you know, when you could look at, you know what I'm saying? They always got to put themselves in your narrative. Look, it's something that, you know what I'm saying, you can't be lost on what the attempts are to always put mayonnaise in the potato salad. I'm talking about.
That's a fact. You know, just again, that, and see when Blues, when he's going over, you know, just breaking down the aspect of a skeletal structure, we're talking about broad shoulders, we're talking about longer arms, we're talking about a broader diaphragm. Like when you think about the black body as a piece of technology, and the reason why our nose had to be a lot more wider, the nostrils had to be bigger, because we had to have a larger amount of intake of oxygen. You know, what our ancestors understood was electricity through the nose in order to continue to stimulate the brain, because they understood that the brain, which is the that sits, you know, under the skull would be part of the skeletal system, which is a crystal. And the fact that we're intaking more electricity, more oxygen, is what is stimulating that piezoelectric component of the skull to, you know, stimulate the electrification of the plasma in the brain, to basically allow then the brain to access a larger aspect of the magnetic field that extends from the heart. So if you look at the body as, again, the black body is a semiconductor, you would understand why our body has to be made a certain way in order to maintain it, because it is the highest form of technology on the planet, you know. So studying the bone alone will tell you where these structures are coming from.
Right. And even the depiction of us in this particular modality, we have to embrace this, right? Even if for them it's a depiction that's based on whatever their mental calculations are of what it is that we physically look like. But even if we look like that, I'm still willing to say I have more in common with this ancestor than I do with one of them at this point.
No, that's a fact.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I know that this ancient ancestor had an intelligence that far superseded anything that we see being exhibited right now, masquerading as intelligence, based on people fumbling around with faulty mathematics, playing with numbers, you know what I'm saying, attempting to pretend that they can calculate like the mind of the most.
The mind of the most.
And you see this antenna, you see this fuzzy, furry antenna, you see this technology, you see this electromagnetism, you see this ability to intake this information and to download it and bring it down the tree of life. You know what I'm saying? Down to Mount Koof, where we know these beings were fully grounded in their natural habitat and their environment, totally tapped into the electromagnetic field.
Yeah, that's a fact. And you know, again, anatomically, you know, these people who are doing these studies doesn't compare to the black body, because pheomelanin, which is the lighter skin pigment, which, you know, we're speaking about these individuals who are doing these studies, their body is producing a lot more ammonia. Their body produces nitrogen, it produces sulfur. which is, you know, one of the key reasons why they have to introduce a lot of meat and a lot of sugar and starch into their diet, because that is what maintains their structure. But again, if we go back to the bones and we look at the strength between the bones of an original person or those who are doing these studies, we would notice that, again, their bones would be a lot weaker naturally because their body produces ammonia, you know? So it's very simple. Like I said, it's very simple to understand, but when they introduce large words and then they, you know, say that we came from, you know, animal, they can completely confuse the whole narrative. Like I said, it creates a situation where we see ourselves outside of the studies and we don't even go any further than to read the headline or the title of the article. So
we don't go this deep into the research. Now, right in front of you, you can look at the jaw lines. Right in front of you, you can look at the distribution of teeth. You can clearly see that this is not derivatives from an animal, but this is just derivatives from a being that had a different skull structure, one that looked like it was more prominently featured and somewhat more larger. And again, that's based on the capacity for you to intake more oxygen and generate, you know what I'm saying, more energy. You know what I'm saying? You can process more. So you have more capacity. And with that more capacity, you know what I'm saying, you definitely have more physical matter, you have more physique. And that's all what I'm looking at speaks to, you know what I mean, like just a stronger version of a being, you know? So it's like we could look at this and see ourselves, whereas they're gonna look at this and see a beast. And that's probably a natural inclination of how they observe through a recessive eye connected to a brain that must be calculating, you know, or envisioning through a fear prism at all times. And based on a genetic fear of being displaced, you know, by this particular species right here that's so ancient that it's not going to yield. You know what I'm saying? It's going to go through it like a Mack truck. It ain't going to yield to the stop sign. You know what I'm saying?
And again, all you got to do is look at the density of the bone itself. You know, back when they used to go to war with the Germans, and, you know, when they used to go to war even further back then with the European would take bats, and when they would break them over the original people, they would notice that the bat will break. And they had to then figure out a way how to continue to develop their technology in regards to weapons, because they noticed that physical weapons wouldn't work on us, because with us being out in the sun all day, every day, the density of the bone strengthens. And not only that, but because the bone is silica and quartz crystal, they also understood too that when we were hunters and gatherers and things of that nature, we had the capacity to hear things from a longer distance because sound can be processed through the bones. So the more denser the bone is, the stronger the sound is. And this is, you know, where the term you get like, oh, I can feel it in my bones, or, you know, things of that nature, is because literally the bones can process sound, and the denser the bone is, the more sound or a higher frequency you can process. So when they, again, get into these studies, we're just seeing a new version of literally the science that they were studying even back in what we call quote unquote slavery days. They had scientists walking the plantation in that nature, trying to figure out how the black body worked. Same thing they do today. So when we're looking at these articles, that's all they're doing. But it's just a new remodeled version. And we don't see that for what it is. We just see basically scientific journals and articles that, again, we see that we think have nothing to do with us, but it's clear as day. Like, they're, you know, studying the black body. That's what it is. They're studying black genetics. You know? And so there go another. You see the knees, the bow-legged knees. Yeah. Yeah, that's,
Yeah, very upright to me.
very upright, right? And you got to take into account too, some of the most original beings, when they stood upright, that gave a connection via the vagus nerve. So the more intelligent original people stood upright because that was the direct communication between the spinal column and the brain. And the brain itself, or I'm sorry, the spinal column, will be considered in Kemet, of course, like the Jed pillar, but that was the support system.
Right.
But it also maintained the integrity of the electricity in the brain so that the brain can continue to act as its own enzyme to continue to electrify tyrosine into neuromelanin. Tyrosine is one of the key factors or amino acid for the process of melanin being made. So the original person had to stand upright because, again, it maintained the electrical current within the brain and continued to keep keep its integrity, keep the brain's integrity electrified. So again, understanding that the body is a piece of technology, there's a reason for everything. And when you look at structures like these that are standing upright, there's a reason why. I have children myself, and I noticed even when my youngest went from crawling to literally standing upright, she started adding syllables to her language. She started speaking a lot more, and it's all in reference because when you literally stand up, you get that that cerebral spinal fluid to go up and down that spine, but also to stimulate the glands in the brain to secrete necessary hormones for you to begin to stutter and utter a larger vocabulary. So, yeah, that's, again, when you look at stuff like this, just understand what you're looking at.
Right. And also, please make the observation that they're showing you with picture what bones they actually do have, and the rest of it is speculative based on their models that they've created. You know what I'm saying? So this is still not an accurate depiction. It's a hypothesis of what they think it probably looks like. All right.
Right.
So these are the bones that they actually do have. Everything else you see in white is what they're filling in the gaps with.
Mm-hmm.
Right, based on their um, alleged models. So they can, frame a frame to look however they feel or want it to look, right? Especially based on what their subjectiveness is going to pretty much bias their observation.
Again, something as simple as the diaphragm is a lot larger for more oxygen intake. Yeah, all of these things are key components in understanding, what you're looking at. So, what is that? And I think do you have the because I was looking over that article in reference to the what is it called, the grandmother theory.
The grandmother theory.
It was speaking about basically how elders are a contribution to longevity.
Oh,
I think that'd be like a perfect segue. I was looking into that. Let me see if I see.
Yeah, living near your grandmother hypothesis.
Yeah, let me see. Yeah, researchers argue that long human lifespan is due in part to the contribution of elders. That's the headline. Because I think that'd definitely highlight let me see. It's from fizz.org. If you type in researchers argue that long human lifespan, it should pop up.
Researchers argue what?
It says researchers argue that long human lifespan, and that alone should pull it up.
All right. See it on screen?
Yep.
Okay. Researchers argue that long human lifespan is due in part to the contribution of elders. According to long-standing canon in evolutionary biology, natural selection is cruelly selfish, favoring traits that help promote reproductive success. This usually means that the so-called force of selection is well equipped to remove harmful mutations that appear during early life and throughout the reproductive years. However, by the age fertility ceases, the story goes that selection becomes blind to what happens to our bodies. After the age of menopause, our cells are more vulnerable to harmful mutations. In the vast majority of animals, this usually means that death follows shortly after fertility ends, which puts humans and some species of whale in a unique club, animals that continue to live long after their reproductive lives end. How is it that we can live decades in selection's shadow? From the perspective of natural selection, long post-menopausal life is a puzzle, said UC Santa Barbara anthropology professor Michael Gervin. In most animals, including chimpanzees, our closest primate brethren, this link between fertility and longevity is very pronounced, where survival drops in sync with the ability to reproduce. Meanwhile, in humans, women can live for decades after their ability to have children ends. We don't just gain a few extra years, we have a true post reproductive life stage, Gervin said. In a paper published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, senior author Gervin, with former UCSD postdoctoral fellow and population ecologist Raziel Davison, challenged the long-standing view that the force of natural selection in humans must decline to zero once reproduction is complete. They assert that a long post reproductive lifespan is not just due to recent advancement in health and medicine. The potential for long life is part of who we are as humans, an evolved feature of the life course, Gervin said. The secret to our success, our grandparents. Ideas about the potential value of older adults have been floating around for a while, Gervin said. Our paper formalizes those ideas and asks what the force of selection might be once you take into account the contribution of older adults. For example, one of the leading ideas for human longevity is called the grandmother hypothesis, the idea that through their efforts, maternal grandmothers can increase their fitness by helping improve the survival of their grandchildren, thereby enabling their daughters to have more children. Such fitness effects help ensure that the grandmother's DNA is passed down. Wow. And so that's not reproduction, but it's sort of an indirect reproduction, the ability to pool resources and not just rely on your own efforts is a game changer for highly social animals like humans, Davison said. In their paper, the researchers take the kernel of the idea, intergenerational transfers or resource sharing between old and young, and show that it too has played a fundamental role in the force of selection at different ages. Food sharing in non industrial societies is perhaps the most obvious example. It takes up to 2 decades from birth before people produce more food than they're consuming, says Gervin, who has studied the economy and demography of the Tsamani and other indigenous groups of South America. A lot of food has to be procured and shared to get kids to a point where they can fend for themselves and be productive group members. Adults fill most of this need with their ability to obtain more food than they need for themselves, a provisioning strategy that has sustained pre industrial societies for ages and also carries over into industrialized societies. Mm, that's crazy. In our model, the large surplus that adults produce helps improve the survival and fertility of close kin and other group members who reliably share their food too, Davidson said. Viewed through the lens of food production and its effects, it turns out that the indirect fitness value of adults is also highest amongst reproductive aged adults. But using demographic and economic data for multiple hunter gatherers and horticulturists, we find that the surplus provided by older adults also generates positive selection for their survival. We calculate all this extra fitness in late adulthood to be worth up to a few extra kids.
Mm.
Hold on, because they really going in. One more second. Damn. Whew. And this is specific to colony collapse.
Mm-hmm.
Why it's so important that we got grandmas and not just grandmas,
right?
And there's roles that just need to be played, and maybe this can help remind us of why. We show that the elders are valuable, but only up to a point, contends Gervin. Not all grandmothers are worth their weight. By about their mid-70s, hunter gatherers and farmers end up soaking up more resources than they provide. Plus, by their mid-70s, most of their grandkids won't be dependents anymore, and so the circle of close kin who stand to benefit from their help is small. But food isn't everything. Beyond getting fed, children are also taught and socialized, trained in relevant skills and worldviews. This is where older adults can make their biggest contributions. While they don't contribute as much to the food surplus, they have the accumulation of a lifetime of skills they can deploy to ease the burden of childcare on parents, as well as knowledge and training that they can pass on to their grandchildren. Once you take into account that elders are also actively involved in helping others forage, then it adds even more fitness value to their activity and to them being alive, Gervin said. Not only do elders contribute to the group, but their usefulness helps ensure that they also receive from the surpluses protections and care from their group. In other words, interdependence runs both ways from old to young and young to old. If you're part of my social world, there might be some kickback, Davidson explained. To the extent that we're interdependent, I'm vested in your interests beyond just simple kinship. I'm interested in getting you to be as skilled as possible because some of your productivity can help me down the road. Like, this is true motherfucking community nation building of why you create community in the first place, and the youth are strong so the elders could benefit from a level of a cushion that comes, but they also have a role to play in regards to being the griots, the educators, the protectors, you know what I'm saying? The extra eyes, maybe sometime the babysitters.
To babies. Right. And this original study came from a guy at the University of Utah, I believe, maybe a few years ago. He was studying the hunters and the gatherers out in Tanzania, which is in East Africa. And he noticed that the grandmothers would be the ones out tilling the fields, pulling the vegetables from the roots and doing pretty much all the gardening. And he came to find out that, based on this study, the grandmothers were the ones who were alleviating the mothers, so that the mothers then could, you know, continue to bear children, you know, at a higher rate. So, you know, this was, again, a study that was done studying people who carry, you know, our genetics out in Tanzania. And, you know, it's just a tall tale of, again, understanding how community works and the role of the grandmother, because she was there to maintain the integrity of the generation that came to pass. And she would be fit enough to be able to maintain herself out in the fields. So again, that way her daughter can play the role of the one who was bearing the children. And also too, now, because that mother is at a certain we want to call it, she's at a basically her body is sustained enough to be able to maintain bearing more and more children. Then those children that the mother bears then carry on the same mitochondria and DNA from the mother. And that way, then that child, when she grows up, she can still carry on the same traits that the original grandmother had. So, you know, again, I think this article is, again, showing how our people, you know, back in those days, you know, found community, and not only community, but just family alone to be, you know, of importance. And, you know, today we don't tend to see grandmothers, you know, playing that role. And it's interesting because even down to a celestial level, we talk about the cosmos and things of that nature. You hear a lot of us referencing Big Mama. And more specifically, Big Mama is talking about, you know, the galactic center, Sagittarius A, which is the black hole in the center of our, you know, Milky Way. But the black hole is what is actually, you know, educating or basically sending and delivering cosmic information to our sun, which is our local star. And, you know, the children of the sun then are getting those instructions from the sun. But again, it originated from Big Mama. So, you know, if you, again, look at it even down to an anatomical, biological perspective, the mitochondria holds its own DNA. The mitochondria is a entity in and of itself in the body. But it's there, again, to produce the energy in the cell, to maintain the integrity of the cell so that the cell, you know, can function and do what it does. So, you know, I find this article to be interesting, and I think this is a good, you know, opportunity for us to then close in on the idea of starting with our women in our lives and even our daughters to find the importance of, when they continue to, you know, get older and older, you know, always look back and consider the next generation to come to pass, because it's on them to continue to not only remain fit, but also understand their role, you know, within the family dynamic. So, you know, I think it's definitely important to see this as a wake up call.
Yeah, and it puts, you know, a real interesting conversation in place with the Roe versus Wade, you know, and thinking about the abortion rates and you know, how many children, for whatever reason, you know, have been somewhat even cut off from the knowledge of who their grandparents or that aspect of their families even are.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And just, you know, a lot of other missed opportunities for that family bond to even happen, you know, because of aborted fetuses, things of that nature. And really thinking back to the emphasis that we put on having very fruitful families, you know, a lot of children. And this is when, again, we were able to produce, you know, when we were in full production mode on farms dealing with agriculture, you know what I'm saying? And we could feed them children, you know, we can have them. And we come from areas of this country where there was enormous sized families. You know what I mean? Like people was mob deep. Um, you know, to this day, you know what I'm saying? They still tapped in, You know, like, oh, my family, we got 20 uncles and stuff. You know, we're not really having children to that degree nowadays. You know, because less and less are we responsible, you know what I'm saying, for feeding ourselves.
Right.
Most of the mercy of somebody else, you know, they're in charge of the produce. You know, men are not stepping into that role to take control of production. You know what I'm saying? We have to get back to the agrarian nature of us, the fact that we did farm, and there's a lot of power in controlling your own food source. There's a lot of power in communing with the earth. There's a lot of power in, you know, just having that relationship, knowing that you can provide and put a seed in the ground and yield, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And not dependent, you know.
Not dependent, right? And that's the issue today, is because we're allowing people outside of our culture to feed us foods that's not conducive to our technology, which is the body. And going as far as back to, you know, the original people, our people, they understood, again, technology at a much higher level, so they knew how to strip, literally, or extrapolate nitrogen from the air by way of a high electric discharge, a technology. So when you see our ancestors carrying ankhs and, you know, things of that nature, they actually have physical equipment that they would use to extrapolate different elements out of the air. So they would take nitrogen and combine it with oxygen and ammonia to create nitrogen oxide. And that's one of the key components to fertilization. You need nitrogen oxide in order to literally fertilize, you know, the land and begin to grow crops. But today, what scientists have realized is when nitrogen oxide begins to evaporate, it creates holes in the stratosphere, and more specifically in the ozone layer. So the ozone layer is what protects the stratosphere. And they noticed that because these holes were being developed, there was a large amount of UV light that was coming in. And there was an article that I put up maybe a couple of days ago. It's a fairly new one, where it says there is a large hole above Antarctica in the ozone layer that is allowing a large amount of UV light to come in, which is going to increase skin cancer. That's what the article had said, or the, you know, the title of the article. So if you look at this, you know, and then you compare it to the article, again, we're not living as long as we did back in the day because of our environment. Now they're stripping out nitrogen oxide from the soil, which is now creating a situation where it's no longer mineral dense. It's no longer as electric as it should be. And not only that, but they're figuring out ways how to close that hole in the ozone layer to basically counteract the information that's coming in by way of the sun, which would technically then electrify the body. So they're taking away the greens out the ground. They're blocking out the sun, which again creates an environment that then begins the process of basically a somatic death, a cellular, you know, death at a quicker rate, because our environment isn't conducive to how our body functions. So, you know, it's a huge factor in that. And this is why today, you know, our families aren't as knit and close knit as they were back in the day, is because not only is the conducive not suitable for us, but also there's plenty of distractions out there for us to basically, you know, not maintain, you know, the close knit of the family that we used to have. So, yeah, it's, you know.
Yeah. Again, this goes right back to where we started at, and it goes right back here to hydrogen bonds, family bonds. You know what I'm
Family
saying?
bonds, right.
Being a spark, but not being able to hold a charge as a people. Why so? Because there's water in the hydrogen, right? Something is preventing the bonding and the fusion from happening.
Mm, mm,
And there's something in the mix,
mm.
you know, water and oil thing. So it's like,
Thanks.
you know, as scientists, as engineers, looking at this situation as expressions of, developmental dysfunctions in the anatomy of man, and then, in a broader sense of us as a body corpus, body politic, what I'm saying, a collective mind, what I'm saying, what we call a community. All right, that's a body of people. That body of people forms one big body. That body has a mind. That mind activates ideas and culture, and what ultimately becomes groupthink for that particular group.
And it's interesting again because when you coincide all these articles that we're bringing up and these topics of conversation, even down to Terrence Howard with the technology, you can all bring it back to the black body, to the original family. Because like Blue said, Terrence Howard is talking about hydrogen bonding, but also too, we're talking about family bonding, which then leads to an infinite amount of offspring if we were to maintain the integrity of the body itself by putting the right things in it, and also maintaining the skeletal structure down to being outside in the sunlight. Right.
Right.
So, you see all these articles that we're presenting, but they all have a common denominator to them. And
Yeah, this is about
yeah,
a breakdown of the body by way of hydrogen,
right,
oxygen, nitrogen, and carbon, right? And the interaction and the interface between those different four states, right, is either going to determine to you destroying your telomeres or strengthening them at the end of the day. And that's what it comes down to. That's the real quick way of getting to where we need to get to, and everything else is dressed up around it, and it's called, living a long life, or, dying an early one. You feel
right.
me? And our job here was always based on longevity, and we always had an essential protocol that we were putting in place so we can immortalize ourselves and cast this eternal light. You feel me? But the longer that you had an opportunity to be here to consecrate that experience and that experiment, you know what I'm saying? You wanted to be here and do that, as well as enjoy your family.
Mm-hmm.
And what they're explaining is that from an evolutionary standpoint, that is such a unique trait, because in terms of evolution, especially thinking how someone who deals with a mindset that's generated from limited resources must think. So somebody in the Caucasus region that has to chase their food, right? And they're not going outside and getting food off of the tree where food is abundant, but it's very scarce. They're hunter gatherers. You're not going to have a family full of 14 or 15 or 16
Right.
children pulling their weight, and you're supplying food for grandparents that are not a productive part of your production. You're producing children, and you're responsible for getting them at least to the age of 18 and 21 with enough food that they'll be productive and strong enough that they'll be able to continue and perpetuate your species, your genome, your DNA, your family name further and further and further, right? You got to pass the baton on. This is the first time ever that there's been a generation of people that don't want to participate in proliferating, right, their genetic matter into the future by wholesale amounts. This is the first time ever. And we don't understand and see that, again, as a developmental dysfunction of whatever the pressure or the effect or the attack on the genome has been, where people are like, nah, I'm tired, I had enough. That's called entropy.
Entropy facts.
Right? So, and I learned about this when I was incarcerated in the 90s, right? There was material, I think, that the Hebrew Israelites were putting out, and at the same time I was reading propaganda material that was coming out from the church, where they was battling against intelligent design and random, whatever that argument was, right? Is the universe a random creation and act, or is there intelligent design? Because one of them kind of like ruled out what they considered the randomness of God. So religion was banging on science. But in the interim, they were speaking about entropy. And I was like, that's an interesting concept. I was like, what if that's what our people is going through? That we've been, conscious of ourselves and awake and awoke for millions upon millions of billions of years, doing this over and over and over again. And what if at some point you like, shit, I just want to take a nap now?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Let me sit down and roll a joint and smoke something and think about the last 44 trillion years. It should been.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Let me watch New Kids on the Block. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's yeah,
Or what if you're waking up out of that period?
I wanna read something. This is a book from Iki Sarael. It says, in fact, light or electricity transmission and reception at light speed or beyond could not be possible with entropy. This will mean entropy in a black body is unnatural due to entropy being an unnatural state. Logic would surmise it as disease. One would also have to deduce that the true nature of vegetation from the seed to the plant to the flower is then healthy, not because of a silly acidic alkaline balance, but because of the stored frequencies in its DNA. Therefore, only a true student of the body and nature would know this. Many so-called holistic healers are doing nothing more than recycling YouTube videos and old information. Every piece of the food you get turns into acid in the stomach. So what makes one substance healthy and another one toxic? The answer is in the electricity released from the food and the deuterium, which we spoke about earlier. The nuclear reactor particle accelerator of the black body. So they spoke about, again, the fact that entropy is unnatural. Entropy is a loss of energy. And what our people have to begin to understand is we got to get into the science of neg entropy. Neg entropy is order and harmony. Neg entropy deals with perfect embedding, or what you call constructive wave interference. So in order for information to be compacted in the DNA, to be compacted into the nucleus, to be compacted into a neuron, the information comes from a topological descent. Think about it coming directly from the sun, or a different higher star system, the cosmos in general. But that information has to follow a central pedal convergence, which is almost like a vortex. But that vortex is made up of electromagnetic waves that is going through a state which you call neg entropy, which is just called constructive wave interference. So literally, there are waves that are perfectly embedding within one another, generating a vortex, adding and multiplying the wave velocity and their wave length to a point. And that point then will be the bottom of the vortex, when all the information has been compacted at one point in order to enter the body and store itself in something as small as a nucleus. But again, for cosmic information to be compacted into something as small as a neuron or the DNA, it has to follow constructive wave interference, which is neg entropy, which is harmony, which is order. So it's electromagnetic waves following order, so that way they can compact in something as small as a neuron. But again, entropy is dis-ease because that's a loss of energy, that's a loss of information. So neg entropy again, and neg entropy is important because that also ties into our personal existence. What are we doing to basically allow ourselves the opportunity to be in an environment that is creating harmony, that is creating order, that is allowing us to resonate at a higher frequency? So not only do we as a people continue to or begin to come together in a certain order and harmony, what we were talking about earlier, family bonding, you know, but also to allow us to then acquiesce to, you know, even down to a diet that's more conducive to who we are as a people. That's all following neg entropy, not entropy, but neg entropy, which is order, you know, cosmic order, you know, which is my balance, you know what I mean? So, yeah, you know, we're dealing with transgenerational epigenetic inheritance. And it's all in reference to just being aware of maintaining our genetics. So that way, when we pass it down to the next generation, those kids can then have kids to live longer than those kids, and those kids have kids, and then we continue on, you know, the process. But I want the family to look into that, look into entropy versus neg entropy. And again, neg entropy is dealing with harmony and order.
Look, man, this has been some powerful, powerful information. We've been able to weave a narrative that clearly show people that, you know, we can just randomly roll the dice, and whatever the face ends up being and showing, we're always going to be able to find our face within the face of the dice. You know what I'm saying? You exist in every number, on every facet, and every face of the dice. You know what I'm saying? In every space and every place of this place that they call the plane or the planet, round, flat, obtuse. You know what I'm saying? Icosahedron, whatever it is, you're there. You know what I'm saying? And you have an intricate symbiotic role to play in connection to this plane of existence. And you are the most magnificent piece of machinery on this side of the galaxy until further notice.
Thanks. And also, too, Blue, before we close out, you spoke about, because a lot of the family may not be familiar with it, you spoke about Cepheus. And this had kind of pretty much put the capstone on the conversation that we just had.
You said spoke about what?
Cepheus. You spoke about Cepheus earlier. And like I said, I think the family, some people know who Cepheus is, others don't. But if you could, you know, put the capstone on this conversation, pretty much tying that in together with everything we spoke about, and explain to the family, you know, in a nutshell, what Cepheus really represents and like what that is going to bring about for us.
So, as we've mentioned, you know, on numerous occasions, and I'm sure the family's aware of right now, our North Star, which is our, you know, our guiding point, our guiding node, you know, what sets the template for the directional frequency of where this whole thing is going. The North Star is Polaris, right? And Polaris is located in Ursa Minor, which is the little bear. And you know, that's been a navigational mark. But we are going through something called a precession of the equinox, and that pole or that node is going to change. You know what I'm saying? That particular frequency is going to return to a constellation called Cepheus. In the translation of Cepheus, Cepheus is a Cushite king, an Ethiopian king, and he is the father of Andromeda, and also associated with Cassiopeia. I might definitely be chopping that name up, but these are, these are these mythological celestial figures, you know, and I'm sure the family is very familiar with Andromeda and that particular constellations, and you know the narratives and the stories around the beings that come from there. But Cepheus is the Cushite king, you know, and that particular pole star will be coming back into alignment around 2050, on or around the date, you know, that they're speaking about when they speak about race replacement, and when their quote unquote time is running out, they're speaking about something cosmic. They're speaking about a cosmic node, a direction, you know, guidance, you know, who will have reign on this particular plane, you know, based on their cosmic assignment. And, just the consternation that comes with pretty much accepting the fact that whatever they've been able to entertain is coming to an end. And it's very clear and is becoming very obvious. You know what I'm saying? And there was a scripture the other day, that's why I love these gluten-free slices of daily bread, you know what I'm saying, that I come up with. It's not like pulling it out of the thin air. I'm like, no, look, it's right there. Just see it for what it is. Allow yourself to interpret it and stop fighting and you know what I'm saying, mentally wrestling with it. It's like there's another way that we can see scripture if we're willing to see it for what it is. And they had a passage the other day. I'm trying to find it. It's just been so many of them. All right, that's the false prophet one.
Just to kind of add on real quick what you said, Blue, with Cepheus. Yeah, Cepheus basically, again, like you said, is going to take the place of Polaris that sits at the north point right now, the North Star. And, these individuals who are trying to combat this from taking place, which, will happen inevitably. But, by 2050, they're in fear of a completely black planet. You know what I'm saying? So when we're talking about race relations and genetic annihilation, we're talking about the fact that, like Blue said, it's a cosmic event that's taking place. And they understand that whoever sits at that North Star, the universe or the solar system in totality has to follow the dictates of whoever is sitting at that spot. And that gets into like magnetism and the magnetic field, etc. But, at that point, those individuals who, had to, inevitably serve a karmic debt for the treacherous things that they've done in the past have to literally bow down to an Ethiopian king. And then, the individuals who are original to this planet at that point will, reign supreme. That is what is inevitably going to take place. But everything up to that point is going to be bloodshed. It's going to be all type of shit to take place to combat that from happening. So that is what, in essence, Cepheus taking that role is a completely black planet,
Right. In Mark 7:16, which would have been yesterday's word for the day. If any man have ears to hear, let him hear. You know what I'm saying? So it was written, the seals are broken and the books are open. These words have been spoken. And it's like, if any man have ears, let him hear. It's very clear at this particular point while we here. You feel me? And yeah, glory be unto the Most High. But this has been an amazing What's the Science episode. I think that we have done an incredible job once again of showcasing, our majestic selves from a molecular place under the electron microscope.
That's a fact. Yeah. So, with that being said, family, again, it's another monumental episode. We tied the narrative again, gave you guys some information that was anatomical, quantum. We spoke about some celestial events, but again, if you can see and even go back and watch this episode, there's a common denominator that runs concurrent with everything we spoke about. So, take this episode, at face value and understand it from the perspective of really getting back to not only the family, but bonding with the family and maintaining the integrity of the genetics by, putting certain things in your body that is going to help you, not only you live a lot longer, but also your kids live a long life.
Strengthen your bond.
Strengthen your bond, right?
Strengthen your family bond, strengthen your hydrogen bond, right? And the decisions that you make today, they reverberate and they ripple, okay, through the ocean of time and space, meaning that whatever you eat today, they say affects 7 generations from now epigenetically. So that means that it ripples through the wave. What is the wave represented as? Your family line, your bloodline, right? Because your blood travels in waves. Your blood is a lake. So, understand that decisions that we make today, you have to be so calculated about them because you're making a decision for 7 generations away. You know what I mean? You should not be so selfish. You feel me? And overindulge in all that shellfish. You know what I'm saying? Take it easy, Jack. That got too much mercury. It's gonna make you kind of like wacko jacko. Yeah.
Thanks. So yeah, family, homework for tonight and tomorrow. Study study transgenerational epigenetic inheritance. Study the science called longitudinal interferometry. Go look up Cepheus, the Ethiopian king, on YouTube, or
spell that for them?
Cepheus.
Yes, sir.
Cepheus, Cepheus is spelled
CEPHEUS. Yes.
Yes, Cepheus, the Ethiopian king. So again, transgenerational epigenetic inheritance, longitudinal interferometry, and Cepheus, the Ethiopian king.
Right. Is that not the professor's father's name? Cepheus. Oh, that's Cletus. Cepheus.
Shit, it's that. Hey, I would.
Cepheus. Yeah.
What's, as a matter of fact, not to get off topic real quick, we getting ready to close our family, but I want to ask you, Blue, what's the name of, rest in peace, young dog, but what is the name of that restaurant that he unfortunately made transition at? Do you remember? It was a cookie place. Do you remember the name of it?
Nah, not off the top right away.
Okay. I found it interesting, and this is back when he had passed. I was doing a little bit of research, but actually, I want to say that was his mother's name. That was Cepheus's mother's name. So the name of that cookie spot is actually the name of Cepheus's mother, which I found really, really interesting. I can't remember the name of the cookie joint, but I'm gonna have to go back and look into it. But so many correlations, family, with what we're speaking about. And that's a whole nother conversation that we can get into later on. But homework. So yes, transgenerational epigenetic inheritance, longitudinal interferometry, and go pull up Cepheus, the Ethiopian king. And with that being said, Blue, this is another monumental show. What's the science? And stay tuned, family, because we have another episode coming soon. We'll be tapping into some more information that's coming out relative to science, mathematics, sacred geometry, and everything above the sun, right? So, we're going to land a plane here.
Absolutely. I appreciate you, good brother.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Everybody that tapped into this monumental information pack episode, make sure that you tell a friend to tell a friend, you know what I'm saying, to tap in. Go back and give it a listen again, and we will see you on the next episode.
Peace out, family. Peace.